Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the witnesses here today. I appreciate you being here. I don't know that when in my lifetime I've been more concerned about the internal security of America, not just from our safety and security, but our economic security and on several fronts for different reasons. One of the things that I know that has been spoken about here and at other times is the threat of ISIS. As not only being what I understand the most well-funded, the best organized terrorist organization possibly in the history, but they're also their ability to effectively use the internet and social media. There's one thing to use social media, but those of us engaged in politics, we spend a lot of time studying the effective use of social media. How do you come up and stand out amongst billions of users across the world? And it appears that ISIS is doing a very good job. They're effectively marketing to our youth, which is especially concerning to me, especially those that are vulnerable, those who feel disenfranchised, and even using video games as you have mentioned. And so what are we doing? Are we working with internet providers, social media providers to help combat the use of the internet and social media to spread their radical Islamic idealism that I think is a threat to the future? Are we working with those companies, and are they participating?
I'll start, but I'll certainly ask Mike to take this on too, because the Bureau is having quite a bit of direct engagement with these providers. Partnership with these technology companies on whose platforms this propaganda is riding is a central part of any strategy to counter what's going on. The President's CVE Summit will have a private sector component to it for precisely that reason, to make these companies partners with us. This partnership has a number of elements. It's in part exposing them to the information about what is happening on platforms that they control so that they understand it and that they can understand when terms of service violations are taking place and that they should intervene and take steps to block certain content. But it's also to deepen a partnership and make sure that they understand that we need to be partners with them in going at this more systemically, not simply in response to a single video or a single YouTube posting or something, but actually to think about what kind of relationship between the federal government, law enforcement, and these companies makes sense if we're going to tackle this phenomenon that's creating a serious homeland security vulnerability.
So I'll just add, sir, that social media, when you look at the volume, the numbers of companies, it's hundreds of companies. So we do have direct engagement with those companies that are U.S. based. But when you look at the totality of what the terrorist groups are using, many of these are small social media companies that reside offshore who flaunt their lack of cooperation with law enforcement. So that's the problem. There's a large. You can go to Twitter or many other companies, but there's just a large number out there that unfortunately it's difficult to get our arms around. So there needs to be thought towards how do we affect the totality of the social media platforms that are out there.
Well, obviously the dominant players in social media are American companies. Have they been receptive to work with you? Have you found them to be cooperative?
So we've had ongoing, continual dialogue. In fact, we have a team there now on the West Coast talking to the companies. I would say they understand our viewpoint. I don't think those companies and the individuals who work in those companies want to see bad things happen. They balance the right to privacy versus their diligence and requirement to keep people safe, but it's a volume thing. So it's not, they try to follow the terms of agreement, and certainly if they see individuals violating those terms or service agreement contracts, they shut them down. But when you're talking with that volume, it's a challenge for them. So I would say they understand our problem. We continue to work with them to get them to develop process, technology to help us out, but that's just one part of it.
Okay, thank you. And I only have a few seconds left, but just want to say that when I was in the military, one of the things that we got to was the basic ideology behind an enemy. And that's how you form your strategy for a long-term defeat. And my concern is that we're not properly identifying this as radical Islamic extremists to have a long-term fight, a strategy against the ideology. Typically on the battlefield, most soldiers have a survival instinct that we know that when it comes down to it, they do want to live. In this case, this ideology is that death is a reward. And so I would just emphasize the importance, as Ronald Reagan understood, understanding the ideology of extremism. If we don't, we will find ourselves responding instead of having a long-term strategy. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Can I comment to that really quickly, sir? Can I make a comment to that really quickly?
Please.
So I think it's important to note that the subject matter experts, whether you're talking about organized crime or terrorism, they are subject matter experts. We spend a lot of time training we hire towards subject matter experts to understand. You have to be a subject matter expert to engage in this fight. We have robust training programs that talk about the ideology, that talk about the background, the culture, the history of the radicalization, the history of terrorism. So those programs and those training programs are in place, and they're very important for my folks, and I'm sure the other agencies, to work the threat.